Eli stepped off the small shuttle and felt the soft, strange ground of Varinthia beneath his boots. The air smelled faintly sweet, like flowers he had never seen before, mixed with something metallic, almost like electricity. Towering buildings stretched high into the sky, made of materials that shimmered in the sunlight. Everything was smooth, bright, and alive in some strange way. Alien creatures walked calmly around the plaza, moving on legs or gliding on small, floating platforms. Some had translucent skin, showing a slow flow of colored liquid inside them. Others had more solid forms, covered in metallic scales that shined like polished silver. Despite their unusual appearance, none of them seemed dangerous. They moved with purpose, their glowing eyes observing Eli as he took careful steps forward. He felt out of place, small and unsure. His human body, designed for Earth, seemed ordinary here. But he reminded himself that he was chosen for a reason. He had been selected by the Council of Earth for this mission because he had curiosity, patience, and a mind for seeing details others missed. He was not a soldier, not a diplomat trained in negotiations, not a scientist of great renown. He was simply a young man with determination, willing to do what was asked of him. A soft hum filled the plaza as a tall figure approached. The figure's body was long and elegant, moving with grace that seemed almost impossible. Its skin was a deep shade of blue that shifted in the light, and its many eyes reflected a calm intelligence. The creature stopped a few steps away and bowed, slightly. Eli realized this must be one of the Queen's attendants. "You are Eli of Earth," the creature said in a voice that seemed to echo in his mind, rather than in the air. Eli nodded, his throat dry. "You have been brought here for a test. The Queen watches all who enter Varinthia. She will decide if you are worthy." Ellie swallowed. I understand," he said. His voice sounded small, even to his own ears. The attendant gestured, and a massive doorway opened silently. Beyond it was a courtyard, filled with light, so bright it made Eli squint. At the center, a large building rose like a palace, but unlike any palace he had ever seen. Its walls shimmered as if made of water frozen in motion. Holographic images floated around the entrance, showing planets, stars, and strange machines. Birds, or something like birds, flew around the building, leaving trails of glowing dust behind them. The attendant spoke again. "Your first test is simple, yet it is the hardest for many. You will sweep the floors of the palace. You will do this with care, without complaint, and with attention." Eli's stomach twisted. He had expected challenges of skill, puzzles, maybe even debates. But sweeping floors? He forced himself to nod. "I will do as I am asked." The attendant bowed again and handed him a broom. It looked ordinary, but when Ellie held it, he felt a strange energy hum through his fingers. The broom seemed almost alive, responding to his movements. He took a deep breath and entered the palace. Inside, the palace was vast. The floors were smooth, made of a material that changed color under his feet. The walls were adorned with patterns that shifted and moved, like living murals. Strange plants grew along the edges, their leaves glowing softly. There was no dust, no dirt, in the traditional sense, but Eli could see small particles floating in the air, tiny motes of something like stardust. He started sweeping carefully, guiding the broom in slow, precise motions. At first, it felt meaningless. The palace was already perfect. But as he moved, he noticed things others might not see. A small panel along the wall was slightly crooked. A holographic projection was flickering faintly. A glowing vine was tangled near the floor. He straightened the panel, fixed the flicker, and gently untangled the vine. He realized that this was what the Queen wanted, not just action, but attention to detail, care, and patience. Hours passed. Eli continued to sweep, moving through hall after hall, The palace seemed endless, with rooms that twisted and folded in ways that defied earthly logic. Sometimes he felt dizzy from the angles, but he pressed on. He discovered small mechanical creatures that cleaned themselves but were malfunctioning in quiet ways. He adjusted their tiny mechanisms. He saw glowing orbs that powered parts of the palace and gently repositioned them when they had drifted. Every motion was simple, yet each carried thought and care. Through it all, the queen did not appear. Eli did not know if she was watching directly or if she observed through the palace itself. He didn't need to see her. The presence of the palace, the floating images, and the silent attendants reminded him that his actions mattered. By midday, Eli's arms were sore, but he felt a growing sense of purpose. He was not just sweeping floors. He was learning the rhythm of this world. He began to notice patterns in how the palace worked. The lights dimmed and brightened in cycles. The air seemed to pulse with energy when he moved carefully. Even the floor seemed to hum in response to steady, thoughtful motion. He realized that this palace was alive in a sense, and he was becoming part of it. As he moved to a large central hall, he saw something extraordinary. A wide, open space with a polished floor reflected not his own image, but the images of his thoughts. Tiny holograms formed as he walked, showing moments from Earth, his family, the shuttle that brought him here, the council that chose him. He paused, unsure of how the palace could capture such intimate visions. Then he understood. This was a reward for focus and humility. The palace acknowledged his presence and his care. He continued his work with renewed energy. He did not rush. He did not try to impress. He simply moved with care and attention. Hours turned into a day. The palace transformed under his hands, not in structure, but in energy. Light flowed more smoothly. The air felt warmer. The holographic projections seemed clearer. Eli realized that this was what the queen meant by sweeping the floors. It was not about removing dust. It was about observing, caring, and harmonizing with what was around him. By evening, he finally reached the last hall. It was quiet, with a high ceiling that shimmered like water under sunlight. Eli paused, looking back at the long corridors he had traversed. The palace felt complete, not because he had cleaned it, but because he had moved through it with purpose and attention. Then a sound echoed, a soft, melodious tone that vibrated in his chest. The attendants appeared, surrounding him silently. A doorway opened at the far end of the hall, and Eli saw her for the first time. The alien queen stood there, taller than he expected, her presence radiating calm authority. Her skin shimmered like liquid metal, her eyes deep pools of light. She did not speak at first. She simply observed him, her gaze moving over every detail of his actions, every motion of his hands. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was gentle, but carried weight. "You have completed the first test. You did not rush. You did not complain. You saw what others could not, and you acted with care. Many fail this test because they are too proud or too eager for recognition. You have succeeded because you understand that greatness begins with small, humble acts." Eli bowed deeply, unsure what to say. His heart pounded, but he felt a sense of quiet pride. The queen nodded toward another door. "Rest now. Tomorrow, your second test begins. It will require your mind, not your hands. Remember what you have learned today. Even the smallest motion can shape the future." Eli left the hall, feeling exhausted but exhilarated. He walked through the glowing corridors, the broom still in his hand, thinking about what the queen had said. The palace had seemed like a simple place at first, but it was alive. It had tested him not with danger or weapons, but with patience, observation, and humility. As he settled into a small chamber prepared for him, he could hear the soft hum of the palace settling for the night. The walls pulsed with gentle light, and tiny holograms danced above his bed, showing stars, planets, and strange alien symbols. Eli realized that he had begun something far larger than himself. Tomorrow would be another test, one that would challenge his mind. But for now, he understood that every action, even something as simple as sweeping the floor, could matter more than he ever imagined. He lay down, exhausted, but awake with curiosity. Outside, the world of Varinthia shimmered under twin moons, and Eli felt a quiet determination grow inside him. He would meet whatever came next. He had begun to understand that being human on this strange planet was not a weakness. It could be a strength, and tomorrow, he would prove it again. Eli woke early to a soft, glowing light filling his room. The walls pulsed gently, as if breathing, and the holographic stars above his bed had shifted into new constellations he did not recognize. He stretched and felt the soreness in his arms from sweeping the palace floors. It was a pleasant ache, proof of his effort and attention. He smiled faintly, remembering the Queen's words, that greatness often began with small, humble acts. A soft chime echoed through the room, and a panel slid open on the wall. The attendant from yesterday appeared, moving gracefully, as if floating rather than walking.
"Eli of Earth, it is time for your second test," the creature said.
Its voice remained calm, but carried an unspoken weight. "Follow me." Eli nodded, leaving his small chamber and stepping into the endless corridors of the palace. The halls seemed brighter now, as if they were alive and responding to his presence. The attendant led him to a room unlike any other he had seen. The doors opened to a large circular chamber filled with light and floating panels. Holograms of planets, cities, and glowing networks hovered in midair. Machines hummed softly, and thin beams of energy connected everything like the threads of a giant web.
"You will enter the simulation hall," the attendant said.
"Here, you will face challenges that require your mind. The situations are real in outcome, though they are controlled. You will be tested on problem-solving, strategy, and understanding. Remember what you learned yesterday. Observe, consider, and act with care." Eli stepped forward. As soon as he entered, the floor beneath him glowed faintly, and the holograms responded to his presence. He realized he could interact with them by touching the lighted panels and moving his hands through the projections. A city appeared, its buildings tall and fragile, and a storm began forming in the holographic sky. A flood of energy surged through the simulation, threatening to overwhelm the city. Eli frowned. He instinctively thought about Earth and how humans faced challenges. Panic and rushing rarely solved problems. He took a deep breath, observing the holographic storm, the energy flows, and the paths where the water would rise. Slowly, he moved his hands, adjusting channels, diverting streams, and reinforcing structures. The storm weakened, flowing around the city rather than through it, leaving the buildings standing. The Queen's voice spoke suddenly, echoing gently through the room. "Observe not only the challenge, but its connections. Do not fight the problem. Understand it." Eli nodded, realizing that this was more than a test of skill. It was a test of perception, of seeing the larger pattern rather than reacting to the surface chaos. The simulation shifted quickly. A distant colony faced a failing energy grid. The lights flickered, machines whirred, and workers moved in confusion. Eli studied the holograms, noticing how one system affected another. He moved the glowing conduits in precise arcs, rerouting power from a low-demand area to critical systems. Light steadied, machines hummed smoothly, and the colony continued functioning without collapse. Hours passed, though Eli could not tell the exact time. Each simulation was different, each problem unique. Some involved weather control, others were like puzzles of alien transportation systems. Each required careful thought, patience, and understanding of connections. Eli began to see patterns in the aliens' logic, how their systems relied on balance, rhythm, and foresight. Occasionally, the Queen appeared as a faint, glowing figure within the simulations. She watched silently as Eli moved, never interfering but always present. Eli felt her eyes on him, calm yet unyielding. He realized she was testing more than his mind. She was testing his spirit, his persistence, and his humility. Some challenges would have been easy if he acted carelessly or rushed, but he refused. Each solution required thought, attention, and the patience he had learned from sweeping the palace floors. In one simulation, Eli faced a network of floating islands threatened by a cascading collapse. Bridges cracked, energy flows failed, and inhabitants struggled to move safely. At first, he considered moving quickly, fixing each island one by one. But then he remembered the Queen's words. Do not fight the problem. Understand it. He paused, studying the island's patterns, their energy connections, and the timing of the collapse. Slowly, he adjusted the supports, shifted the bridges, and reinforced the energy channels. One by one, the island stabilized. The holographic inhabitants cheered silently as they moved freely again. Eli allowed himself a small smile. The attendant appeared again, moving through the air without a sound. Your work is precise. You understand the systems, yet you also show care for those within them. Few can achieve this balance.
You are learning quickly. Eli nodded.
I am trying to see the bigger picture, not just the problem itself, he said. I think understanding comes before action. The attendant tilted its head as if pleased. Wisely spoken. Many who enter here fail because they act without understanding, or they ignore the consequences of small choices. You have shown patience, observation, and care. These are qualities the Queen values. After what felt like a full day, the simulations shifted into a final challenge. A massive holographic galaxy appeared, with multiple colonies on various planets facing crises simultaneously. Storms, energy failures, and resource shortages threatened to destabilize the entire system. Eli's task was to coordinate solutions across all locations, ensuring that each problem was solved without causing another. He moved carefully, sending resources where they were needed, reinforcing weak points, and adjusting energy flows. Each action affected multiple locations, and he had to think ahead to prevent new problems from arising. He felt a growing sense of connection to this galaxy. The alien systems were not just machines. They were alive, in a way, each colony dependent on the others, each action affecting the whole. By the time he completed the final simulation, his mind was exhausted. But he felt a deep satisfaction. The galaxy was stable, the colonies safe, and the energy flows balanced. He looked around the simulation hall, noticing subtle changes. The holograms shimmered with a sense of calm, as if the systems themselves acknowledged his care. The Queen's voice spoke again, this time from all directions. You have learned well. Your mind is sharp, yet your heart guides you. You have solved problems not with force but with understanding and careful thought. This is the path of leadership, of true greatness. Eli felt a warmth spread through him. He realized that the first test, the sweeping of the floors, had prepared him for this. It had taught him observation, patience, and care. Qualities that now allowed him to see patterns, understand systems, and act wisely. Greatness was not in dominating others or using power recklessly. It was in attention to detail, empathy, and careful planning. The attendant moved toward him once more.
You have completed the second test. Rest now.
Tomorrow you will face the real challenge. It will require not only your mind, but your courage and your ability to act in the real world.
Prepare yourself. Eli left the simulation hall. His body tired, but his mind sharp.
He walked through the palace corridors, now feeling more connected to this strange world. The hall seemed alive in a new way, responding to his presence with gentle pulses of light. He thought about what he had learned, that attention, care, and understanding were as important as skill or strength. As he entered his chamber, he paused to look at the small broom leaning against the wall. It had been his tool in the first test, a symbol of humility and focus. He realized that the same lessons applied to the galaxy he had just saved in simulation. Small actions, thoughtful choices, and careful observation could shape outcomes far larger than themselves. Eli settled into his bed, the glowing stars above shifting into new constellations. He thought about the real challenge that awaited him tomorrow. He did not know what it would be, but he felt ready. He had learned patience, observation, and understanding. He had learned that greatness began with care, whether sweeping floors or coordinating galaxies. Outside, the twin moons of Varinthia cast soft light across the palace grounds. Eli closed his eyes, feeling their quiet determination. He had passed the first test with his hands and the second with his mind. Tomorrow, he would face the world itself, the true battlefield. And he knew that what he had learned would guide him through whatever awaited. For the first time since arriving, he felt a deep sense of belonging. He was not just a human in an alien world. He was a participant, a learner, and a contributor. And he understood that this journey was far larger than himself. It was a test of character, patience, and wisdom. Qualities that could shape the future, no matter how vast the challenges ahead. As sleep finally took him, Eli dreamed of a galaxy shining with countless lights, each one connected by threads of care, attention, and thoughtful action. He realized that tomorrow, the lessons of both the broom and the simulations would come together, preparing him for the challenge that truly mattered. Eli woke to a soft golden light streaming through the windows of his chamber. The palace seemed quieter than before, as if it were holding its breath. Today, he knew, would be different. The second test had challenged his mind, and now the Queen had promised a test of real action, a challenge that would take him out of simulations and into a world that truly needed him. The attendant appeared as always, gliding gracefully across the floor.
Eli of Earth, it said, voice calm yet commanding. The time has come for your third test. You will leave the palace and enter the field. The challenges you face will be real. Observation, patience, and care will be your tools. You must act with thought and purpose. Eli nodded, a mixture of excitement and nervousness coursing through him. He followed the attendant out of the palace and onto a wide, open plaza. A large shuttle awaited, its surface smooth and reflective, its engines humming softly. As he stepped inside, he felt a thrill.
This was no simulation. This was the real world. And the Queen's test would measure everything he had learned. The shuttle rose quietly, moving above the palace and over the lands of Varinthia. From above, Eli could see cities, forests, and rivers glowing softly in the morning light. Then the shuttle began to descend toward a distant region, a cluster of buildings surrounded by jagged rocks and flowing energy streams. The closer they came, the more Eli realized the place was damaged. Small fires glowed faintly, machines lay overturned, and the ground seemed unsettled. The attendant spoke again. This is the outer colony of Laura. It has been struck by a series of natural disruptions. The inhabitants are safe, but their homes, systems, and machines are in danger. Your task is to restore balance, coordinate the efforts of the workers, and ensure the colony functions smoothly again. Remember, this is not a battle against an enemy. It is a challenge of care, understanding, and leadership. Ellie stepped onto the rocky ground, his boots crunching softly on the uneven surface. He surveyed the scene carefully. Machines whirred weakly, their circuits sparking occasionally. Bridges over energy channels were broken, blocking paths between buildings. The colony workers, alien in appearance, moved in confusion. Some had translucent skin, some metallic limbs, but all carried tools and tried their best. Eli drew a deep breath and remembered the lessons from the palace and the simulation hall. Observation first, then careful action. He walked slowly through the colony, noticing the most urgent problems. A collapsed bridge blocked workers from reaching a vital energy generator. Sparks flickered from a broken conduit nearby. Several small machines that distributed water to homes were jammed. He could have rushed to fix each one individually, but he stopped and considered the whole situation. He began by directing the workers. Move that generator here, he said, pointing to a safe spot near stable ground. Now, shift these energy conduits in this order. Work together slowly. Don't rush. The workers paused, confused at first. They had never seen a human give instructions calmly, without panic or force. Slowly, they followed his directions, their movements coordinated and deliberate. Eli then focused on the collapsed bridge. He used a combination of simple tools and clever thinking to reinforce it. He tied beams together, guided the workers, and used nearby energy fields to stabilize the structure temporarily. It was a small action, but it allowed others to cross safely and carry resources to critical areas. As he moved through the colony, he continued to coordinate, repair, and restore. He noticed minor problems that no one else had seen. A loose panel that could short-circuit energy lines, a small hatch blocking the water channel, a warning light flickering on an important machine. Each detail mattered, and Ellie addressed them all. Slowly, the colony began to stabilize. Hours passed, and Eli felt the strain of constant attention. Sweat ran down his brow, and his arms ached from lifting, bending, and guiding. Yet he pressed on, moving calmly, patiently, and carefully. He reminded himself of the first test, sweeping the palace floors. Small actions, repeated with care, could lead to meaningful results. He realized that this challenge, though real and exhausting, was an extension of that lesson. By midday, the colony was starting to function again. The energy generators hummed steadily, machines moved smoothly, and the inhabitants were able to continue their work. Bridges were stable, water flowed to homes, and minor damages were repaired. Eli watched as the workers began coordinating among themselves. No longer confused or panicked, they moved with purpose, following the order he had quietly established. The Queen's voice echoed softly through the colony, though she was nowhere to be seen. "Observe not only the problems, but how each action affects the whole," she said. "A true leader understands the connections between all things. You are learning, Eli." "Keep going!" Ellie smiled faintly, feeling a surge of confidence. He was not acting alone. The colony had begun to respond to his guidance. Yet he remained aware of details others might overlook. He saw a small child stranded near a weak structure and calmly led the child to safety. He adjusted a water channel that had begun to overflow and guided the workers to repair the broken roof of a community building. Every small motion mattered, and he kept moving with focus. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Eli faced a new problem. A section of the colony's main energy conduit was critically damaged, and without repair the entire area would lose power. The machines were too heavy for him alone, and the workers seemed uncertain. He paused and thought carefully. Instead of trying to force the machines into place, he arranged a plan. He instructed the workers to build a temporary support, and gradually moved the conduit into position while reinforcing it with energy fields. Piece by piece, the conduit was restored, and the colony's systems hummed steadily again. By evening, the colony was fully operational. Machines worked smoothly, bridges and channels were stable, and the inhabitants moved through the area with ease. Eli stood on a small hill overlooking the colony. From here, he could see the results of hours of careful work. The colony was alive again, functioning like a well-orchestrated system. Eli realized that the challenge had been more than physical labor. It had required patience, observation, and understanding. It was a test of character, of humility, and of leadership without force. The attendant appeared beside him, moving silently across the ground. "You have succeeded," it said. "Many who face this challenge become frustrated or careless. They act hastily and create more problems than they solve. You have done the opposite. You have observed, guided, and corrected with care." Eli looked at the colony, exhausted but proud. "It was not easy," he admitted. "But I remembered what I learned. Every small action matters. Every choice affects the whole." The attendant inclined its head. "Exactly. The Queen observes not only your skill, but your understanding. You have shown that a human mind, guided by patience and care,
can achieve what many would fail to do. Tomorrow, your final test will begin. It will require everything you have learned, and more. Prepare yourself, Eli of Earth. Eli spent the night in the colony's guest quarters, reflecting on the day. He thought about the first test, sweeping the palace floors, and how attention to small details had guided him through the simulations. He realized that each lesson had prepared him for this real challenge. Sweeping a floor had taught him patience. The simulations had taught him strategy and observation. And now, in the colony, he had learned the power of guiding others with calm and careful action. Outside, the twin moons of Varinthia rose, casting soft light across the restored colony. Eli stepped onto a balcony, looking out at the quiet streets and the glowing energy channels. The inhabitants moved about with a sense of confidence, their work harmonious and orderly. He felt a deep satisfaction knowing that he had helped restore balance, not through strength or force, but through careful thought, observation, and guidance. As he looked at the sky, Eli understood the true meaning of the Queen's tests. It was not about power, or battle, or glory. It was about seeing the connections between things, acting with patience, and caring for those around him. Greatness was not measured by the size of one's strength, but by the ability to guide, protect, and understand. He returned to his room, exhausted but awake with thought. Tomorrow, he would face the final test, the culmination of all he had learned. He felt ready. The lessons of the palace, the simulations, and the colony had shaped him. He had learned that small acts repeated with care could lead to the greatest outcomes. He had learned that observing, thinking, and guiding could restore balance where chaos threatened. And as he lay down to rest, Eli felt a quiet certainty growing within him. He had faced the real battlefield, and he had succeeded. The final test awaited, and he knew that what he had learned so far would guide him through whatever the Queen had planned. He closed his eyes, listening to the soft hum of the restored colony, feeling the rhythm of life flowing steadily again. Tomorrow, he would rise to meet the final challenge, and he would carry with him the lessons of patience, care, and understanding that had brought him this far. Eli woke before the first light of dawn. The colony of Laura was quiet, peaceful after the day's work. The air smelled faintly of warm earth and blooming energy plants, and soft currents of glowing light drifted along the streets. Today was the day of his final test, and though he felt nervous, he also felt ready. He had learned patience from sweeping the palace floors, strategy from the simulations, and leadership from restoring the colony. Now, the Queen would see if he could bring all of it together. The attendant appeared silently, as if it had always been part of the morning light. "Ellie of Earth," it said, voice calm and even. "The final test awaits. You will be returned to the palace and given a challenge that will measure all that you have learned. Observe, act, and guide. The Queen will be watching closely." Eli nodded. He stepped into the shuttle and felt it lift smoothly into the sky. From above, he saw the palace shining in the distance, its walls shimmering with calm energy. Yet the shuttle did not head to the palace entrance. Instead, it moved to a nearby plateau where the terrain was uneven and covered with strange plants, their leaves glowing softly under the rising sun. Eli realized that this test would not be in the comfort of the palace. It would be in the open world where he would need to apply everything in a larger, more complex space. When the shuttle landed, Eli stepped out and looked around. Several floating devices hovered nearby, and a series of holographic panels lit up along the plateau. The attendant gestured. "The final test is not about a single problem. It is about creating harmony in a complex system. You will coordinate the floating devices, adjust energy flows, and guide the inhabitants who will assist you. Every action affects the whole. Your task is to bring balance, efficiency, and safety. Remember what you have learned." Ellie nodded and began by observing. The floating devices were delicate machines, each controlling part of the plateau's energy, water, and communication systems. If even one was moved incorrectly, the balance of the plateau could fail.
Alien inhabitants, some metallic, some translucent, some with soft flowing shapes, moved nervously around him. They looked to him for guidance. He remembered the lessons from the colony of Laura. Calmly, he began issuing simple, clear instructions. Shift that device slightly to the left. Reinforce the energy beam here. Work together, don't rush. The inhabitants paused, then followed his guidance. Slowly, the machines began to stabilize, their movements synchronized and smooth. Eli felt a thrill of satisfaction. This was the real battlefield, not one of violence, but of coordination, observation, and understanding. As he moved through the area, he noticed subtle problems others would have missed. A water conduit was misaligned, threatening to flood a small grove of glowing plants. A communication beam flickered, causing confusion among the inhabitants. A support panel was loose, which could destabilize part of the plateau. Each small issue could have grown into a larger problem, but Eli addressed them calmly, carefully, and in order. Hours passed, and the plateau slowly came to life under his guidance. The floating devices hummed smoothly, the water flowed evenly, and the inhabitants moved with confidence. Eli felt a growing sense of connection to the place, as if he were not just guiding it, but participating in its rhythm. He realized that this was the essence of the Queen's tests, understanding the connections between all things and acting with patience, care, and thought. Suddenly, a new challenge appeared. A section of the plateau began to shift slightly, as though the ground itself was unsettled. Machines wavered, and the inhabitants paused in confusion. Eli paused, taking a deep breath. He studied the area carefully, noting how the shift affected the devices, energy flows, and movement paths. Instead of panicking, he began to move systematically.
Reinforce the panels here, he instructed, pointing to weak points along the ground. Adjust the energy devices in this order.
Move slowly. Keep balance. The inhabitants followed, and Ellie worked alongside them, moving with care, steady hands, guiding every action. One by one, the devices stabilized, the shifting stopped, and the energy flows returned to normal. He had faced uncertainty and complexity, yet he had acted calmly and thoughtfully. The Queen's voice echoed softly across the plateau, gentle, yet commanding. You have observed, acted, and guided. You have demonstrated patience, care, and understanding. The greatest challenges are not those of strength, but of balance. You have proven that a human mind, guided by wisdom and humility, can achieve what others might fail to do. Eli paused, listening to the calm authority in her voice. He realized that the final test was not a single task, but the combination of everything he had learned, sweeping floors, coordinating simulations, restoring a colony, all had prepared him for this moment. The Queen had not tested his strength or combat skills. She had tested his character, patience, and wisdom. He continued working as the day progressed. A small river that ran along one side of the plateau began to rise, threatening to overflow onto the lower energy channels. Eli guided the inhabitants to build temporary barriers while adjusting the energy devices to redirect excess water. He noticed that one device's alignment was slightly off, and he corrected it, preventing potential disaster. Step by step, the plateau stabilized, and harmony returned. By late afternoon, Eli stepped back to observe the full plateau. The floating devices moved smoothly, the water channels were steady, and the inhabitants carried out their tasks efficiently. The plateau hummed with life and energy, perfectly balanced. Eli felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He realized that he had not only completed the task, but he had done so in a way that respected every element of the system, the machines, the environment, and the inhabitants themselves. Eli of Earth, you have completed the final test. The plateau is stable, the inhabitants confident, and the systems functioning. You have not only solved problems, but guided others to act with understanding and care. Few could achieve what you have done. Ellie looked at the glowing plateau, feeling exhausted, but fulfilled. It was not just me, he said quietly. The inhabitants, the devices, the plateau itself, they all needed guidance, but also patience. Every small action mattered. The attendant inclined its head, a soft gesture of approval. Exactly. The Queen values understanding, humility, and leadership. You have demonstrated all these qualities.
Come, she wishes to speak with you. Eli followed the attendant back to the palace.
The corridor seemed brighter now, alive with the energy of the day's work. When he entered the grand hall, the alien queen was there, standing at the center, her eyes glowing softly. She moved toward him, her presence calm and commanding. You have completed all tests, she said. You have shown patience, observation, understanding, and leadership. You have proven that true strength is not in force, but in wisdom, humility, and care. Many come seeking glory through power, yet you have achieved it through thoughtful action and harmony. Eli bowed deeply. Thank you, Your Majesty. I only did what I could, step by step. I learned from each task and try to act with care. The Queen nodded. That is exactly why you succeeded. You have not only proven yourself, but you have shown that humanity has a special quality, an ability to think, observe, and act with compassion and understanding. You will be a bridge between our worlds, a guide for future interactions, and a symbol of what humans can achieve. He had never imagined that simple acts like sweeping a floor could lead to such a moment. He realized that the Queen's tests had been less about proving his skill and more about nurturing his character. Each challenge had taught him something new: patience, observation, strategy, guidance, and understanding. He looked around the grand hall, noticing the subtle movements of the palace itself. The walls pulsed with light, and the floor reflected the harmony of the world around him. The Queen's presence felt both immense and gentle, a reminder that great power could be tempered with wisdom and care.
Your journey has just begun, the Queen continued.
You have learned the lessons of patience, understanding, and guidance. Now you will carry them into the wider universe. Use them to help, to guide, and to inspire. Greatness is not measured by conquest, but by the harmony you create. Eli bowed again, his heart full of gratitude. He realized that the tests were not over, simply because the challenges were complete. The lessons would continue, shaping him as he moved forward. He had learned that even small actions, done with care and thought, could have enormous impact. He had learned that understanding systems, guiding others, and acting with humility could achieve results far greater than force alone. As he left the grand hall, he looked out over Varinthia from the palace balcony. The colony of Laura lay in the distance, glowing softly under the twin moons. The plateau, the palace, and the world itself seemed alive, responsive to thoughtful action. Eli understood that he had become part of that balance, a human who had proven that even a single person, acting with care and wisdom, could make a difference. He held the small broom from his first test in his hand, smiling faintly. It had been a simple tool, yet it had taught him the most important lesson. Greatness begins with small, humble acts. It grows with attention, patience, and understanding. And when those lessons are applied to the wider world, the results can be extraordinary. Eli breathed deeply, feeling the calm energy of the palace around him. The Queen had tested him, guided him, and now trusted him. He knew that his journey was far from over, but he also knew he was ready. He had learned to see connections where others saw chaos, to guide where others panicked, and to act with wisdom where others acted with force. As the twin moons rose fully into the sky, casting soft light across the land, Eli felt a quiet certainty within him. He was not just a human in an alien world. He was a participant, a guide, and a symbol of what humanity could achieve when it acted with patience, care, and understanding. And in that moment, Eli understood that the tests had been more than challenges. They had been a journey to discover the true power of being human.